I want to tell you about a conversation I had during a command training flight about a year ago. Candidate was good, technically solid, conscientious, clearly put the work in, but he'd been struggling towards the tougher end of his course. He'd had a difficult simulator session a few days earlier, different examiner, and we were talking through it during the flight. He said something I haven't forgotten since. He said, "I don't know what the instructor was looking for." All the way through his command course. No idea that the observable behaviours existed. I want to talk about that. Because if you're approaching your command upgrade and you're trying to figure out what your examiner wants to see, there's a very good chance you're solving the wrong problem entirely. Let me back up for a moment, because depending on where you fly and who you fly for, the phrase observable behaviours might mean nothing to you yet. And if that's the case, this is probably the most important thing I'll say in this entire series. EBT, evidence-based training, is a framework that's been progressively adopted across the industry over the last decade or so. Pace of adoption varies enormously. Some operators are fully embedded in it, others have adopted it in name, not quite in practice, and some are still running the old model. Pass or fail, defined maneuvers, tick the boxes, and out you go. The old model had a problem. The check was about the check. Candidates prepared for specific scenarios, specific maneuvers, specific examiner preferences. Whether any of that translated into a safer pilot on the line was, to be generous, loosely correlated. EBT exists to fix that. Instead of assessing whether you can fly a particular approach in a particular way on a particular day, it assesses competencies. Defined, published, standardized behaviors that describe what a safe and effective commander actually looks like, derived from decades of accident data and incident analysis. They're not secret, they're not the examiner's personal wish list, they're available to anyone who takes the time to look. Our candidate, all the way through his command course, hadn't looked. And here's the uncomfortable part. He's not unusual. If your airline hasn't fully adopted EBT yet, and plenty haven't, most of what I'm about to say still applies directly. The behaviours that define a good candidate are the same regardless of which form the examiner is filling in. The OBs don't invent good airmanship, they describe it. I'll do a proper deep dive on EBT and CBTA in a dedicated video, but for now, if you take nothing else from this module, take this. There is a published picture of what a good pilot looks like. Go and find it, read it, then stop trying to fly your examiner, start trying to demonstrate that picture. Here's the other thing I want to address directly, because it shapes how candidates approach the check in ways that actively work against them. The belief that the examiner is looking for reasons to fail you. We're not. We don't fail candidates. What I'm doing in that simulator is facilitating a scenario, structured, controlled, designed to let you demonstrate what you're capable of. If a candidate doesn't make the grade on a given day, it's almost never because the examiner had it in for them. It's almost always because they had a bad day at the office. Bad days happen. They happen to experienced captains. They happen to people who are, by any reasonable measure, ready for command. Now, about preparation. There are WhatsApp groups and study forums where candidates dissect every possible scenario, debrief each other after every session, build a comprehensive library of what might come up. I understand the instinct completely. It's also largely the wrong approach. You cannot prepare for every scenario. The scenarios are a vehicle. What's being assessed are competencies. What you need isn't a library of situations you've mentally rehearsed. What you need is a robust decision-making framework you can apply to any situation, regardless of whether you've seen it before. Know your memory items. Know your limitations. Have a sequence of actions you've genuinely internalized, not memorized for the check. Because under pressure, the library falls apart. The framework doesn't. There's something else worth naming about the study group culture, something subtler than just over-preparing for the wrong thing. When a candidate has been thoroughly debriefed on someone else's session, they arrive in the simulator with a preloaded expectation. They see the initial failure, they recognize it, and somewhere in the back of their mind, they start anticipating what comes next. Because they've heard this story before. Event X, then event Y, roughly in that order. Problem is that they're no longer responding to the aircraft in front of them. They're pattern matching against somebody else's session. The moment that the scenario diverges, as it inevitably does, they're wrong-footed in a way they don't fully understand, because the assumption was never conscious in the first place. What you should be doing is exactly what the aircraft is telling you. Read the ECAM. Gather information from every source available given the time you have. Instruments, crew, environment, build a picture based on facts. Make a plan from that picture, not what you think you remember happening to somebody else 3 weeks ago. Now, what I see repeatedly across experience levels, airlines, and aircraft types, the one-man show. The candidate who takes on everything, manages every system, calls every action, drives every decision. First officer sits there watching, occasionally in awe, more often in a kind of professional boredom that is, frankly, quite something to observe from the back of the simulator. From where that candidate is sitting, they think they're performing, demonstrating capability, showing they can handle the pressure. What they're actually demonstrating is that they've fundamentally misunderstood what the role requires. Every task you absorb is capacity you're spending. Capacity is finite. The situations that go badly wrong aren't the ones where the crew run out of knowledge. They're the ones where the crew run out of capacity. Where task saturation reached a point where something critical got missed, not because nobody knew what to do, but because nobody had the headspace left to notice it needed doing. Good captain doesn't manage their own workload. They manage the workload of both crew members. You're not there to save the day alone. You're there to make sure the day doesn't need saving. So what does good actually look like? The word I keep coming back to is collaboration. The simplest illustration is how candidates use questions. Most use closed questions without realizing it. We've covered everything, haven't we? That is a closed question. It points at yes. First officer with a concern, a doubt, or a piece of information you've missed is significantly less likely to offer it in response to a question already facing one direction. What have we missed? Different question entirely. It assumes there might be something. It genuinely opens the floor. The other thing I'm looking for is whether you understand the why behind what you're doing, not just the what. On an airbus, under pressure, fly the aircraft, navigate, communicate with the relevant parties, then the ECAM tells you what the problem is, walks you through the actions, follow them, establish what the aircraft can and can't do, and proceed. As a team, using a decision-making model you've actually internalized, not borrowed from a WhatsApp group the night before. Boeing, same logic. ICAS instead of ECAM. The aircraft changes, the thinking doesn't. A candidate who understands the logic of that sequence can adapt when the scenario doesn't fit the template. Candidates who's memorized the words is in trouble the moment something arrives in a slightly different order, which in my experience it usually does. Everything I've described, the collaboration, the open questions, the workload management, the thinking behind the procedure, all of it can be demonstrated in a simulator. But the candidates who do it most naturally aren't the ones who practiced it for the check. They're the ones who'd already been doing it on the line. Start somewhere you might not expect. The briefing room. Not the simulator. Not even the aircraft. That's where we're going next. How the relationship with your crew actually works. Why some captains make it look effortless, and why the ones who get it wrong very often don't know they're getting it wrong. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this was useful, you know what to do. See you in the next one.